Yeah, let me first say those groups are currently involved with or litigation. They're suing the port. We have no doubt that we are going to debunk all of their claims.
Let's start by looking at how this project came about. How and when did this organization come together?
Well, it's a great question. We are a governmental organization. We are statewide, but we're not an entity of the state of Utah, similar to like the Utah Department of Transportation, which is a state agency. We are actually a separate organization. And so, with a statewide focus, so we have the opportunity not only to work on projects in Salt Lake City, but literally across the state of Utah, from San Juan County to Iron County, all the way to Box Elder County in the north. We're in about 15 different counties, I think, at this point. And so we were created in 2018 to harness the two perspectives that you just discussed, both the logistics and the economic side. And so we have the ability to create infrastructure and then also to help recruit and create jobs for our Utah citizens. And so we've been in an entity for about 6, 7 years now. We've really started expanding over the last couple of years, but we feel like as an organization, we're kind of coming into our own in terms of what the port is supposed to be accomplishing.
Okay, so can you talk to me a little bit about its regulation and how the organization is regulated?
Absolutely. So we are first and foremost subject to state statute and state code. So we have a 5 member board as directed under state code. However, the final oversight comes back to the legislature and to the governor. Both of those groups kind of control and oversee and govern our organization, either directly through board appointments or through the actual statute itself. Day to day, we do have a board that oversees the operations of the port. And so it's a 5 member voting board. We have 8 members total. And ultimately, regulatorily, we fall under the state's purview, but we also have significant internal policies and other regulatory features that we have to follow to ensure we're abiding by not only the law, but also good governmental practices.
So, looking at this project, like I said, this is a very ambitious project. You've got about 12 projects, 12 different projects throughout the state. And if people are curious, they can actually go to your website, and I'll put that link in the description, and they can check out everything about the authority and all the different projects that they have. So, like I said, because you have 12 different projects throughout the state, talk about maybe give a brief description of how different they are and what purpose would they serve the public once they're completed.
Absolutely. So our project areas are very different. And our main project area is in Salt Lake City. It's about 16,000 acres surrounding the Salt Lake City International Airport. And in that area, we're really targeting projects around air cargo development, rail cargo development, and attracting new manufacturers. So, as an example, we've offered an incentive and helped bring Northrop Grumman into the project area to help create jobs. We've worked with another company, a number of other companies here in the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City, and then we're also working in places like Little Garland, Utah, where we help bring Lakeshore Learning into their community. That's 500 jobs, 1.2 million square foot facility up there. And then we're also down working with BZI Steel in Iron County. They are still they work with Still. They're working with Amazon, another other number of other big companies on projects. So we've helped them establish in the community, also get their products to and from their Cedar City location into a global marketplace. And so all across the state, each project area is going to be a little bit different. As you mentioned, we've got one in several different counties, and they're all a little bit different. But our goal is the same: create logistic strategies and create economic growth.
I want to talk a little bit about partnerships because you did mention those. Can you tell me what kind of partnerships that you've built, whether it's with local, private, or other government organizations, and explain how these partnerships function and what specific benefits they provide to the public?
Absolutely. So our primary partnerships in terms of like the public-private partnership model have to be public-public. So first and foremost, our partnerships are with local communities. That could be a local city, it could be a local county, but they have to invite us in by way of adopting a resolution in one of their city or county council meetings. And then we do establish that partnership. It becomes a legal framework and a financial framework because some of the money that would have gone towards to the local taxing entity then comes to the port for redistribution. We then are able to establish any number of types of private sector partnerships where we can help provide public infrastructure. So we cannot provide any developer required infrastructure, but we can help provide local public infrastructure, whether that's a new road that's going to serve a site or sewer, water, any number of things to help get a site up and going. We can also offer incentives to larger businesses if they want to come in and establish, create jobs, and so we can work with them directly. And so, really, we are a public. At our heart, we really focus on those public-private partnerships in terms of helping stimulate growth throughout the state.
So you've mentioned uh, public as far as like governmental. How close do you work with city governments as well? I'm curious about that.
Very close, and that's the heartbeat of our partnerships in our organization. We have to work closely with whatever community we're representing, and so all of the money that we generate stays in their community. And so if it's Iron County as an example, we work very closely with their local officials, Cedar City, or any other community throughout the state. We have to work very closely with them because we can't just bring in something that's going to overpower their community or be something they don't like. We don't have land use authority, so they still have to approve the permitting and other regulatory requirements. But we want to take our lead from local communities.
You'd mentioned something that I'm curious about. What are some of the limitations of the UAIP?
Well, we've got a lot of limitations, and I think there are people who feel like we're a very broad development organization. But as I mentioned, we don't have land use authority or zoning permitting. There's a lot of things that we cannot do. You look at a seaport, and they have even like policing powers and things like that. We do not have any of those. Ours is more of a financial construct. And so, in terms of what we can actually bring to the table, I think there is a public perception that a port is something that has broad authority and powers. We're not. We really don't, and we don't want them. We don't need them. Ours is more of financial construct.
Are all of the state projects underway right now, or are they in the planning stages? What can you tell me about that?
Well, all of them are in different phases. Where we've been in Salt Lake City the longest, that one's probably the furthest developed at this point. And ultimately, that one, looks very different than, say, Juab County or Wayne County or some of the other areas where it may take a little bit longer to get these project areas up and going. And so, yes, they're all at different levels of development now. Excuse me. And in some areas like Twilla, we're already, seeing Savage that's finalizing a public-private partnership in terms of a rail facility there. And in other places, it's not nearly that far along.
We had mentioned this earlier because you said jobs was one of the things that you wanted to provide, or one of the benefits to the public. What are some other benefits that the public can see from these projects?
Well, we hope there's a lot of public benefit. The number one thing that we look to is economic impact, and that's in again that hybrid between the logistics and the economic, making sure that we're bringing in good high wage jobs. A lot of times those are industrial and manufacturing jobs, but those are the jobs we want because they have a significant public benefit through their economic supply chain. As an example, in one of our project areas, we've got Northrop Grumman. Companies like that can have 200 up to 200 and maybe even more supply chain partners with small businesses all across the state of Utah. That's a huge impact, and so that's helping bring new blood into local communities and into our economy. Um, the other public good that we want to see is the ability to get our goods in and out of the state more quickly. We have a lot of trucks on the road right now. In fact, we've got a higher percentage of trucks on our road than any other state. And so we hope that as we're helping to develop rail and air infrastructure, that we can help take trucks off the road and create a better shipping environment for everybody involved. That's less pollution in the air. That's our goods and services, or our goods more quickly received. And the reality is, we all depend on those goods. You think about the rooms we're in, probably everything in this room that I'm sitting right now was shipped in to the state of Utah. I don't think there was anything that was made here. And so, you think about our cars, our houses, most of the materials that we deal with one way or another every day came in from outside the state of Utah. So we have to have as good a logistics system and transportation system as we can have. So when we're talking public benefit of the port, we absolutely believe that Utah can have a more efficient transportation system than what we currently have, and we can create jobs for future Utahns and current Utahns as well.
How is the current system set up with regards to logistics and or logistically speaking, and how does the projects that you have improve on those?
Very good question, and this really is our bread and butter. So Utah is, post World War II, we have built a lot of roads, and we're very dependent on I-15. We're very dependent on I-80, and these major arterial roads that run throughout our community. The entire Utah, community system is built on the roads. We all love our cars. Not nearly enough of us use public transportation. Obviously, we have low utilization rates, so I mean those are things that could be improved as well. But it's all back to that same issue. We love our cars, and so the current transportation network, we have one of the best departments of transportation in the country. UDOT builds incredible roads. Our hope is that we can get people to start using more rail and more air to ship their goods. So, to your question, right now our transportation network is heavily built on roads. We feel like if we can create better access to transportation, loading stations, and different things like that, both air and rail, it's going to help take trucks off the road. We've heard some data say that one train can take up to 300 trucks off the road. That's really impressive. We need more of that. And so, when you say how do we what are we building to add to that? So rail loading stations. If you think about this, we didn't have any rail loading stations in the southwestern portion of the state until the port came in and helped fund one. So everyone was shipping their goods up to the northwest quadrant. That's not efficient at all. So how can we help load the like steel is a good example from BZI. How do we help load that at their facility instead of bringing it up to Salt Lake to be loaded? And so, if you think about, you could not get onto I-15 unless you took all the back roads to get to, Salt Lake City from Cedar City. That's not going to be very efficient. And so, creating better access points across the state is where we've been focused.
Now, is the Utah Inland Port Authority something that is meant to stay long term, or is it like a temporary project where once it fulfills all of its objectives, it'll just cease operations or evolve into something else?
I think there's always going to be a forward facing aspect to our organization. And so we're involved, we hope, in the future of cargo transportation. What that looks like might be very different, whether it's drone delivery from, Amazon, whether it's air taxis. Those are all things that we're kind of involved in on the periphery. And so, I mean, we don't know what the future of air cargo is going to look like. I don't see our organization going away anytime soon because I think the future of air cargo or cargo delivery is going to be different than what it is today. But we have to be able to differentiate and get away from just road delivery.
One of the issues that the UIPA has faced is transparency. And to your credit, your organization has made efforts to improve transparency, like holding public meetings and making the board's policies available through your website. What additional steps are being taken to build public trust? And are there examples where the community feedback has actually either change the course of a project or improve the transparency of the organization?
Absolutely. And so we have some groups definitely that uh, have tried to hold us accountable in terms of making sure that our internal controls and that our governance is being properly done. The Utah State Legislature has been very involved in that. We've been through multiple audits, even some of those including with the auditor's office. Um, and so we have several organizations that are responsible for our governance. We also have stakeholder groups who have done a good job holding us accountable as well. We regularly change our policy, our project area plan and budgets, and other key documents based on what we hear from communities. A good example of this, when we were working on a wetlands policy up in Weber County, we heard a lot of feedback on that. And so we made a lot of changes and updates accordingly. And so we have some critics that would not acknowledge that. But no, we regularly adjust and change documents as is needed to accommodate what we hear from the public.
Because there's been so much criticism and such, and you receive it obviously. So how do you deal with that? How does the organization address feedback that is critical?
Well, it's really interesting. We have to really parse out what the feedback is. When it's something that is very genuine and something that we can act upon, we will, and we always do. There are groups and there are people out there that just simply don't want the port to exist. Those are people that don't want any development to occur, and would probably roll back current human development and its evolution. For those folks, I don't know that there's much that we can do. For those who have genuine concerns and are ready to work with us, we're going to work with them all day long. We absolutely are going to be collaborative and hold open and transparent processes. I regularly meet with people who have criticisms and concerns about what the port is doing. In fact, I meet with people a lot, to your point. That's always the question is, what's legitimate? What can we actually act on? And who is out there that just does not want us to exist? In that latter circumstance, I don't know that there's a whole lot that we can do there, but we still listen.
Can people meet with representatives from the UAIP if they had any questions or concerns?
Absolutely. And whether they want to submit public comment, we on our website we have a link for public comment. If they want to email me directly, if they want to do a call, I had lunch with people who don't like what the port is doing. So yes, absolutely. Whether it's me or whether it's one of our local representatives, we're always happy to meet with anybody who wants to learn more about the port or know about the port.
So we have a diverse population here in Utah, and it's becoming more and more diverse as the time progresses, especially within the Spanish-speaking population. And of course, there's other languages too. There's the Pacific Islander. There's a big Pacific Islander population here in Utah. How is the your organization working to reach out to those communities?
Well, we've learned a lot about working with diverse and not just diverse, but also in some cases, particularly on the west side of Salt Lake, underserved communities as well. There, we went through an EPA environmental justice audit, and our organization, I think to the surprise of many, actually contributed funding to help with some of the community outreach efforts. So we have been making good strides to try and work with every community. In my prior role, I was actually with the governor's office during the pandemic, and we learned some really valuable lessons about working with diverse communities. When I was there, you can't communicate to every community the same way. Not everyone absorbs information or news through the same channels, and so we're currently working on a baseline study with Salt Lake City. Part of that is all based on community outreach. And that's particularly true where we have more diverse communities. So we've been working with our groups as we do this outreach to make sure that we are addressing a wide variety of communities' needs. And Caitlin actually just made a hire. We've got a new person that's going to be coming on to help with some community outreach related to a federal grant we received. Very qualified individual. I was very glad at who we were able to get, someone with a PhD and a strong background in terms of being able to work with outreach and some of these other some of these diverse communities. And so I believe that you cannot communicate to every community the same, that it all takes working with them on their level, being in places that are familiar to them, I think is a big part of that as well. You can't invite everyone to the same center. We learned during the pandemic, there are some groups that just feel more comfortable in a church or, at an elementary school or wherever it is. So meeting people on their level and being able to have meaningful conversations is important.
I want to talk a little bit about that later, but first, let's talk a little bit about environmental impact because that is one of the issues that have come up in relation to the your organization. The UIPA projects. Excuse me, that's a lot to say. I apologize. So these projects, some of these projects, particularly the Salt Lake ones, have been criticized by the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, among other groups, as the organization's projects have the potential, obviously, to increase air and truck traffic, like you had mentioned, and freight emissions in areas that are already struggling with something like air quality. Um, what commitments has the UIPA made, and not just aspirational goals, but binding ones as well, to ensure that the projects adhere to clean air and other environmental standards? And also, can you give me some examples of how the UIPA is already doing this?
Yeah, let me first say those groups are currently involved with or litigation. They're suing the port. We have no doubt that we are going to debunk all of their claims. Their claims that our efforts are going to hurt air quality are absolutely false. There's development happening all across the state of Utah, quite frankly. And as we transition from roadway traffic to more rail, it's going to produce less emissions. I mean, we think about the modern diesel train, how many trucks that can take off the road, and how little pollution that has. We're in a far better place doing more of our cargo delivery on rail than having a whole lot of trucks coming into our community. So you asked me for real examples. Let me give you a very real example. Um, I'll give you a couple, but let me first mention in Tooele, we approved a $10 million loan to Savage. They are going to be building a facility out in Tooele, a rail facility. Their initial estimates, it's empirical based, but their initial estimates are that it will save 5,000 truck trips annually from coming into the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City. So it's going to take 5,000 trucks off the road every year by allowing them to take their delivery to Tooele instead of having to come all the way into the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City. So that facility is in its final stage of development. We're expecting it to open later this summer. That, again, very real example. Let me give another one. So in Cedar City, BZI Steel, the company I mentioned earlier, they were sending all of their steel delivery to the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City. It would then get on a truck and be delivered to their headquarters in Cedar City. Now, with a $5 million loan from the port, they've been able to build their own facility, and they're working with a company called RailSync. It's a sister entity, but they now are able to take their delivery right up front. The last I had heard, they've had about 500 deliveries, which equates to about 2,000 trucks off the road by getting their product delivered right to their factory instead of coming through the northwest quadrant. That's less emissions in the air. That's less trucks on the road, less noise. Those are things that we are absolutely involved with. So for people to say that we're just hurting air quality or that's absolutely not true. I believe that we'll show that in a court of law, one. But two, we also have on the ground real evidence right now that we are helping in this area. The reality is the state's going to continue to grow. There's no question about that. We're going to have more people. We're going to have more cars on the road. If we don't take action now, it's just going to get worse and worse. But I think we can create a better future for Utahns actually in the air quality arena by having a better transportation network.
So, who do you work with on environmental impact, that kind of thing?
Well, if it's in a, if and so with environmental impact, that's a statement that obviously is a very defined term. Typically, when we talk about environmental impact, we're talking about NEPA, which is federal regulatory framework around required environmental studies. If we ever do have to go, we have something that triggers what we would call a NEPA review. that is something that we would work with professionals on. Thus far, we as an organization have not been required to do any type of an environmental impact statement. But I think what your question is more broadly is do we have anybody that really knows the environmental world well and can help us navigate and understand any impact that we may have? And I think that's probably your question. And the answer is yes. We've got a very talented environmental engineer, Mona Smith, on our staff. She does a great environmental review before we go through any project area adoption. So every one of our project areas has to have that environmental review completed before we can adopt it so that our board can review and understand all the environmental impacts before the project area plan and budget are adopted.
Going back to what we were discussing earlier, what emission reduction goals do you have for the next 5 years, and how will they be monitored and reported?
Well, so interestingly enough, when our organization was created, there was a lot of uproar. And so for the first couple of years, there were different changes to our statute. One of those from Senator Escamilla came with some air quality not only reporting but measurement and also water quality data. And so that is something. So we've worked with the Department of Environmental Quality. So it's not our organization that's actually doing any of the recording or monitoring or anything like that. But our hope and working with them, because that's specifically in the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City. So our hope is that we would like to see, obviously, emissions overall throughout the valley reduced. I mean, that would be our goal. But working with them, we do a year over year measurement, we do a report out. They've come back with really good information. In terms of like a 5 year strategy or anything like that, we typically are looking to establish a baseline. And so these past couple of years, these past several years working with DEQ, I think we're getting to a better place in terms of a baseline. And we're also, as part of our strategy with Salt Lake City, we're working to establish a baseline as well. So we do not have 5 year goals currently. My guess is we'll probably establish those as we actually have a more firm baseline to go on in the next couple of years.
I want to go back to the public impact because, like I said, I attended one of your public meetings at the state capitol recently. And while I was there was a gentleman who was speaking, and he described witnessing a street fight on Redwood Road in Salt Lake City's west side. And he called it weird. That was the word that he used. And at that moment, the moment that when he said that, it made me realize that there is a disconnect between some development authorities and the harsh realities faced by struggling communities in some of these areas. Not every issue can be addressed solely through housing and jobs. Aside from civil unrest, which what the gentleman saw, there's drug use, crime, corruption, abuse of different sorts, homelessness, among some of the other issues that these communities face. Now, what I'd like to know is, because you had mentioned this earlier, and I'd like to elaborate on this a little bit more. How does the UIPA ensure that not only operates in these communities, but also kind of understands what they're going through and contribute along with other agencies to their improvement?
Absolutely. And so I regularly drive down North Temple from, excuse me, our office in downtown Salt Lake City out towards the northwest quadrant in the airport. And so I see regularly what, those communities, what's happening in those communities. I mean, we talk about the Fair Park community and what's happened with, whether it's drug trafficking or any number of other dynamics that we're working on. It's significant. It really is having to understand what these communities are actually going through. And there's people on every side of this argument. The communities that are impacted, those who are part of whether it's a homeless population or others. How can we serve them but also hold people accountable? These are really difficult problems, and right now I think Salt Lake City has felt like they're probably a little bit alone in trying to handle some of those problems related to violence and crime. But also, and I think this speaks to your broader question, how do we keep those communities safe as well? and make sure that every community and population feels safe in their own neighborhood. But we see it on a day-to-day basis. And so our board in our last meeting was looking at potentially giving some funding to Salt Lake City to help with policing and enforcement. Again, we hope in the right ways that if we can make our communities more safe, we want to contribute to meaningful solutions. To your question, if we're really being honest and we're really being smart, we're not an organization that is set up to come in and really help with some of these community problems. We have to work with those organizations that do. So in the past, we have provided funding and grants to different nonprofit organizations, specifically in the Northwest Quadrant, that we felt like was going to have an impact. We've worked with Salt Lake City on some contributions as well, again, with policing and code enforcement and other things that help to create. Our hope is to help create safer environments. So I think we would feel like we are part of the communities in the sense that we're getting funding from those communities, or not directly from those communities, but from those cities. So we feel like we need to be part of finding good solutions. But again, I would be kidding myself if I said we are the organization to fix all those things. We're probably not. But if we can partner with organizations, provide funding where we can, for us, those are really good solutions.
We've mentioned jobs. So, what I'd like to know is how does the UIPA ensure that those jobs are accessible to Utahns? So, but I'm talking maybe particularly to people from rural or undeserved areas and not just workers brought in from out of state with more experience.
Well, we worry about that. I see that stat a lot. I've seen some stats that say, up to 80% of new jobs that are created in an area can be taken by people from outside the community. We're really not interested in doing that. We like to provide people jobs in the community. And so, in my prior role at the governor's office, we created a lot of jobs. That was our organization's responsibility. One of the things that sold me on coming to the port, even before I came on as the executive director, I was talking with Victoria Petro. In fact, I think it was the first time I met her, and she said that exact same thing. And so I said, we were at the Capitol at the time, and there were a bunch of aerospace companies. And so I took her over to one of the aerospace companies, and I said, Victoria, you're telling me that you know a lot of people who are looking for good jobs. And I had one of the premier aerospace companies in the Northwest Quadrant right there. I said, this company's telling me they need good people. Why aren't we making a connection here? And within 5 minutes having a conversation, they were talking about doing job fairs in the right places and getting out and doing a better job reaching out to the community. I'm confident that we were able to help get some people employed that probably had never thought about working in the aerospace community, but now they've got good, full-time, high-wage jobs. And so higher wage jobs. So I think just making connections is the simplest thing. People think, oh yeah, well, Boeing or Northrop Grumman or Albany, you're in the Northwest Quadrant. Therefore, you would think that people in the Northwest Quadrant community or the West Side community would be fully aware of those jobs. That's not the case. And until you have somebody that can help bridge the gap, thankfully, a lot of times the Department of Workforce Services, DWS, can help do job fairs in the right places. So working with them, they've also got an online labor exchange that they've really adapted for diverse communities, which has been positive. But to your point, and it's a really good one, these companies need labor. And, we have people from diverse backgrounds that can help fill those labor demands. So just making the bridge is important. And if we get people that are willing to work together, we can do that. And I think we are.
So, to finish off, there's been a lot of public scrutiny, as you're well aware, of this organization, the uproar every time some new idea comes out, whatever. And also, media reports have always reported on those objections. And what I'd like to know is what is the one thing that you think would help people understand the UIPA better? And what's one thing that you wish people would take away from the conversation that we're all having?
It's interesting. I think for me, I appreciate the media. I know they give us a lot of attention. A lot of times they'll just focus on, kind of a loud critical voice. At this point, I don't think people know that, we've helped recruit, I, whether it's through an incentive or even matchmaking, about 30 different companies here to the state of Utah. I don't think people know that we're taking thousands of trucks off the road. I don't think people know that we're helping them get their products more quickly. The inland port is involved in good things all across the state of Utah, not just here in Salt Lake City, but in rural communities and other shoulder communities, counties as well. And so I hope people are willing to go beyond the headlines and really look at what the port is actually doing. Because if all they hear is, oh, the port's doing this or that, and it's not really accurate, they're missing the real story. And the real story is an intriguing one, and unfortunately, not too many people get to hear that side of it. So I hope people look at the real story of what the port's doing and not just what's in the headlines or what have you.
So, anything else that you want to cover that we haven't discussed already that maybe you would like folks out there to know?
Hey, we hope we're making the state a better place. We want to leave Utah a better place than what we found it for future generations, and we absolutely believe that we're doing that.